All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. Welcome to an evening edition of Mending Connections. And there's a reason why this is so late in the evening. I'm actually talking to someone who is all the way out in Alberta right now. Yeah, that's right. Peterborough, we go places, apparently. So welcome to Mending Discussions. This is going live on the KSAC Facebook as well as on the KSAC Instagram. Hello to everyone on there. And what's really awesome about these chats is that not only do we take these to our social media pages, but they also go live on the radio. So not live per se, but we do take this to the radio. We call it Man Cave Confessionals. It's happening every Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. on Trend Radio 92.7 CFFF FM. So hello to all the listeners on there. Today I've got a really special guest. We have William all the way from Alberta tuning in. Hello, how are you?
Hi, Alicia. I'm well. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Now I gotta ask, how's the weather over in Alberta?
It's been rainy. It's been very rainy. Today it's beautiful. So we're taking it day by day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of what we have to do with everything happening today. Okay, so I guess let's go back before where you are now, and let's talk about how you got there. So you did the MENding program. You were part of cohort number 1. So may I ask, first and foremost, what got you into MENding?
Yeah, what a great question. I don't actually even remember how it got referred to me. I think it was through someone at my work. But I was working at Fleming College at the time in residence life there. And residence life jobs are unique because we're working with students oftentimes fresh out of high school. And so conversations about gender-based violence and sexual violence and gender roles and all these really challenging things come up every single day in a million different ways. And so I think we all try really hard to do our best to make the world a better place, but the more tools we have in our toolbox, the more we can do. And I'm kind of obsessed with adding tools. I love workshops, I love trainings. And so I just signed up for it, and I'm so glad I did.
Mm-hmm. And so what were some of the big takeaway messages that really stuck out for you during that MENding program?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is that this is a little cliche, but in a lot of ways, society sucks. I think, our North American society, maybe I'll contextualize it. I think a big takeaway for me was that everyone gets put into boxes, right? We get put into boxes of who we are supposed to be and how we're supposed to act and who we're supposed to want to have sex with and fall in love with and how we're supposed to get sex and how we're supposed to interact within relationships and friendships and in workplaces. And it's just so tough. We've all been so taught to engage in really harmful behaviors that we don't even know are harmful. I'm sure, I'll say I'm probably harmful every day in one way or another. And this journey is so hard. But what I took away from it is that there's people doing the work, and the work is real and we can do it, even if it feels like crawling uphill. And I'm saying that as a white man. So, imagine. Well, you don't have to imagine, I guess. But.
No, for sure. So now you've taken what you've done in the MENding program and you've headed out west. So what's going on out in Alberta there for you?
Yeah, I'm still working in higher education. I've decided that I don't enjoy full-time studies, like being a full-time student. It's not really fun for me. And so I'm working full-time now in higher education, still doing residence life, which is great, and finishing up my education online and having a lot of conversations about these types of things. On my campus, I'm part of our team that sort of leads our sexual violence bystander intervention work. I liaise with our local sexual assault center here in Edmonton to get some programming going on. And so these conversations are a big part of the work I do. And I think a bigger part of the work we all do, we just don't realize it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So leading these bystander intervention workshops, I know obviously you've done stuff in Peterborough and now you're doing stuff out west. Have you noticed any differences in terms of how people talk or learn about bystander intervention or maybe certain scenarios that come up? Has there been any differences, or do you think it's quite similar that students, especially post-secondary students, are in a way struggling across the board?
Yeah, I'm going to say they're struggling across the board. I recently actually wrote an article about what it's like to work in higher education in Ontario versus Alberta. Mm-hmm. And the really big takeaway message for me in talking to my colleagues and doing some more like narrative research is that all this work is, no matter where you are, is checking your biases. I think I'll name it. I'm in Alberta. And when I came here, I said, there's going to be a lot of sexist cowboys. That was my thought when I moved out here. And there are sexist cowboys, I would say, but there's also sexist cowboys in Peterborough, right? And so checking those biases, I think struggling with these issues is, I found, not provincial, it's just human. And that makes the work we do easier too, because it's just something we're all going through when we don't have to crazy redesign our strengths and our programs. We're just looking at what are the things we do that hurt us and hurt each other, and how can we be better to each other?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a lot of struggles with bystander intervention and how to intervene, because I think what happens is that you have to practice in a way. And unfortunately, to get practice, you need experiences. You need to actually be there and be witnessing these things. And it's not until we are really reflecting on them when we realize, like, holy moly, this is actually happening a lot more often. And there are a ton of opportunities that maybe aren't so overt to intervene and to get involved in.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny because in society, I think, again, that's that buzzword, but I think that that point about them being overt and sometimes covert is such a good one, because once you start tuning into it, you'll realize the number of opportunities to intervene in something is so much greater than you ever noticed before. Little things like telling someone, do we swear on these live streams? Are these family?
A lot of people see them.
Okay, so when we tell people don't be a P word, referring to female genitalia, I'll say, if that makes sense. Things like that sometimes can seem innocuous, but there's a lot of coded language there, and a lot of insinuations there of essentially what you're saying is, which essentially what the person I think is saying is don't be a woman, and we know not all women have vaginas, but I think that that's the purpose of the message, and something like that, easy to fly over your head. But once you get this sort of like spidey sense, I guess, it's is everywhere. It's all over the place, and it's even coming out of our own mouths sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I think the ways that we learn about it are not as adults and post-secondary students, but we hear this language in elementary schools. And when I do the man box activity with young men, they are saying these words like nonstop, like boom, 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 boom. So yeah, and it's definitely, yeah, sorry, we're just getting some comments, and so I'll just read those out. Can you hear that distraction I just had? So so I just confronted my uncle with his part. Too many people say they don't know, and he is one of many with the family. So I think this is talking about maybe something that the uncle did, and so it just makes intervention so much harder, especially when it's a family member, when it's someone that we know, especially if that person has harmed us. So it really just adds many layers to bystander intervention. And people on Instagram are loving what we're talking about. I think we're going back and forth between bystander intervention and man box activity, what we do with young people. But you mentioned something about boxes, about gender boxes. Do you want to go more into detail about what you learned about those boxes, maybe as a man or really with all genders?
Absolutely. Well, and I actually am hoping we can talk a little bit about my favorite book in the world. Anyone who follows me on social media is sick of hearing about this book because it's all I post about. I'm going to show it just because the cover is so funky and fun.
Okay.
It's Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And this is like the book, I think. I wouldn't ever recommend someone reads one book in their life and call it quits, but if you had to, this might be the book. And it speaks so much to what we're talking about with these boxes that people are put into. And so I can share a little bit about my experience, maybe as a man. I self-identify as a man. And that hasn't always been easy, I guess I'll say. I self-identify as a queer man, a gay man. And so it's tough, right? When that's not the box that we're asked to be put in. And growing up, there was a lot of times where I pretended to be straight because I felt like that's what I needed to do. And I worry so much about young people especially, but everyone who is still not only being put in these boxes by the outside world, but feeling like you have to put yourself in the box to survive that outside world. That is so damaging. And I just want to be part of these conversations to tell anyone, but particularly young people, because those are such formative years. Young people like me, I'm also young, that, you know, reach out for help and have these conversations. I promise you, for all these people who might say fit into that box, there's people like me and like Alicia and everyone who's watching the screen that says, screw the box. You are so great, whoever you are. If you're half in the box or not in the box at all, I don't even care. So great for you. You're great.
And someone was saying just before you get into the book, so the horrific language that we pick up and the language that we essentially use to degrade people, as you said, typically involve words that are associated with women, associated with the LGBTQ plus community. But someone says on our Facebook, it becomes common language in peer groups for sure. Tricky to let go unless you bring it to their attention a few times, but it works. So yeah, those very small interventions of, oh, is that, oh, what did you mean when you say that? Or yeah, and then follow-up comment that it's so much more than a box, definitely. And Stu is saying, smash the box, smash the patriarchy.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Well, and here's the thing too, is the boxes, what we have to remember is there's sort of two sides to this. I think a lot of times we hear people say, well, I think this comes up with actually pronouns a lot too, is people say, well, it's been done so long this one way, or maybe people who are a little bit older aren't able to change, or it's just so hard, and it is so hard, but we really can't conflate so hard with impossible. It's worth acknowledging that this isn't learning. This isn't learning that these things are harmful. This is relearning. This is throwing out your old ideas and bringing in new ones, and that's so much harder than a new concept. But it's not impossible. We can't conflate the two.
It's clearly not impossible, because if I can say a sentence like, oh, it's so lit, like that is new language that we have learned. And it's interesting how we're more open to learning certain types of language, but not language that, I don't know, makes people feel equal. It's just interesting to me. Let's get back to the book, because I know you're so excited to talk about this book. So we got Untamed. It's always been that way. It's the most exhausting excuse to hear in every situation, for sure. I know Untamed talks about that.
It does. Yeah, listen, this is my favorite book. I can't stop talking about it. So Glennon Doyle is a wonderful human being. She is the CEO and founder of a charity in the United States called Together Rising that fundraises millions of dollars for women in crisis. They just posted a story the other day about this single mother of multiple children who was washing all of her clothes in the bathtub because her washing machine broke down, and she couldn't afford to get a new machine, and her hands were just like falling apart because of all the damage. And Glennon's charity, I can't remember what they did, but they bought her a washing machine or something like that, you know, something to solve the problem. And so Glennon is just this wonderful, wonderful woman who's just on the ground being like, screw all this stuff. Let's find women who need help and just give them what they need. Let's just trust that women know what they need and give it to them. And so she's wrote this book called Untamed. And it starts by talking about this cheetah at a zoo who has been trained to chase a like ratty pink stuffed animal on the back of a truck. And that's the show. That's what people come to watch. And Glennon relates it to, her book is focused a lot on women, but she's very explicit that a lot of the messaging applies to people of all gender. But talks about how a lot of women that she talks to say things like, I just feel like life is supposed to be more than this. Like, I feel like it's supposed to be more beautiful than this. Like, I just feel like, you know, something's going on. But then there's all these messages to all people, but I think especially women, that to be satisfied, you know, be grateful for what you have. Why do you keep wanting more? And that's what's happened to this cheetah, right? Just chasing this pink stuffed animal.
Yeah.
And so she talks about how this cheetah is meant to be running in the wild. And it's the same with people, and especially women, right? And this is just me conveying the message. This isn't me speaking as an expert of what it means to be a woman. So anyone feel free to tell me I'm wrong. I'm just quoting, I promise. But it's this idea that you're not crazy for wanting more in your life. You're a cheetah. Of course you want more in your life, right? Like, this society has taught you to chase the pink stuffed animal on the back of the truck. And we sit with that, and we know in our hearts that that doesn't feel good enough, that doesn't feel like enough. And of course it's not enough, because it's nonsense.
What do you think has made us think that that pink stuffed animal is enough? What do you think about that?
That's a really good question. So many things. I'm going to read a quote, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I have a bunch I want to read. I'm so excited. I love this book.
It's like you had a psyche thing to know that I was going to ask a question like that.
It's like it's written down on my whiteboard. You didn't even tell me ahead of time, though.
No, I didn't.
So this is, I'm going to read it kind of quick because it's a little long, but I think it's worth it. I think it's worth hearing. So the chapter is called Apples. So I am 10 years old, and I'm sitting in a small room in the back of Nativity Catholic Church with 20 other kids. I'm at church where my parents sent me on Wednesday nights to learn about God. Our teacher is my classmate's mom, and I don't remember her name, but I do remember her telling me that she keeps telling us she's an accountant during the day. She asked us to sit on the carpet in front of her chair because she's going to explain to us how God made people. I hurried to get a spot in the front. I'm very curious about how and why I was made. I noticed that our teacher does not have a Bible or any other books in her lap. She is going to speak from memory. I am impressed. She begins. God made Adam and put him in a beautiful garden. Adam was God's favorite creation, so he told Adam that his only jobs were to be happy, rule over the garden, and name the animals. Adam's life was perfect, except he got lonely and stressed. One night, God helped Adam give birth to Eve. From inside Adam's body, a woman was born. That is why she is called a woman, because women come from the womb of man. Womb man. I am so amazed that I forget to raise my hand. Wait, Adam gave birth to Eve? But don't people come from women's bodies? Shouldn't boys be called women? Shouldn't all people be called women? Adam and Eve were happy and everything stayed perfect for a while. But then God said there was one tree they shouldn't eat from. We know this story. So one day, even though it was the only thing that Eve wasn't allowed to want, she wanted an apple from that tree anyway. So one day she got hungry, picked the apple off the tree and took a bite. Then she tricked Adam into taking a bite too. As soon as Adam bit into the apple, even Adam felt shame for the first time and tried to hide from God. But God sees everything, so God knew. God banished Adam and Eve from the garden, then he cursed them and their future children for this time, because Eve's original sin is inside all of us. That sin is wanting to know more than we are supposed to know, wanting more instead of being grateful for what we have, and doing what we want to do instead of what we should do. That was some careful accounting. I mean, the story of human creation is that man allowed woman to live, and then she messed it all up for all of us. That's what this teacher, and I don't think that this is the story of the Bible. I don't know if that's a full picture, but these are conversations that are happening with young children. Man allowed women the grace to live, and then she screwed it all up, and look at us now.
Interesting.
So, this was in response to your question of how do you think we get into these boxes? And, my answer is that people force us into these boxes with physical punishments, sometimes social punishments, economic punishments, to a point where it feels, and in some cases is impossible to live outside the box. What I take away from that, though, is as much as it's, I think, really heartbreaking and really sort of motivation sucking to be told that we're all responsible for these horrible things and it's just other humans who are hurting us. It's not some weird outside force, it's us doing it to each other. And that sucks, that feels really hurtful. But also it means that we're the ones who can do different. We actually have the power to change this. It's not like some weird meteor that goes over Earth every once in a while and creates sexism. This is us, and it sucks, but we can. There is hope here.
Yeah, we have the power to make this change. And I think what's really important for this MENding program is that it's not about centralizing men's voices. It's about saying, use it. speak out against this. If someone says something to a woman like, well, you got the right to vote, so quit complaining, like that is just all part of sexism. It's all part of being complacent in where you are. And I think that as human beings, we can want more, and that should be okay. Why is it a debate as to whether or not we should be getting someone a washing machine? Why is that? Why is that a debate? And I think it even speaks to larger structures than just one person wanting a washing machine, right? Like this is a ripple effect, if you will, of not having enough money to have a job, which is a real thing. If you're going to have a job, you have to afford childcare, you have to afford transportation, you have to keep your house heated, going, you have to continue to pay rent, like it. And then speaking to larger cultural aspects too of, well, maybe you can't get a job in a certain area, or maybe because you don't have a certain level of education, because we deem education as the pinnacle of knowledge, when really there are so many different modalities of knowledge, and we continue to take lived experience out of it.
Right.
A lot of things, how it all comes together.
Yeah, and I think it's worth acknowledging too that it's not accidental. These aren't, it's not an accident that we put people in boxes. These are systems that benefit people. It's just not any of us, you know? It's not any of the people who are being impacted on it. It's not any of the people who would watch a video like this. These systems exist to protect a small group of people, and it's not most of us, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I think when we think about systems protecting people, we think of men always being privileged from these systems. But I would even argue that men are even suppressed from these systems as well, which kind of goes back into this box of men need to act and behave a certain way in order to fit in, or else.
Yeah, well, and I think something that's interesting that comes up a lot is, I think sometimes it's hard for people to reconcile that women are really, you know, oppressed and really are put into boxes, and non-binary folks are so brutalized in our society in so many ways. And also there's a lot of detrimental effects of these things on men. And I think a lot of times people have a hard time looking at all those as existing at the same time. And there's a really big sort of, I think, difference in our lens. And so if you're someone who's, you know, in charge of funding for a major sexual assault center, you might have to sit down and look at some data and make some decisions to say, we need to put more funding in programs targeted towards these groups because there's a greater need there. That's totally true, and that should be happening, because if we know one group is going through something on average way worse, more on average resources are needed there. That's okay. But in terms of our role, because I'm not doling out money for these types of programs, I'm just here to relearn and help people whenever I can. All these things can exist at once, you know? Someone can be part of a system that oppresses women and also be oppressed themselves. And I'm not a judge. I'm not here to put people in jail for breaking the law or condemn people. I'm just here to support people who I have the privilege to support. And so there's no dichotomy here, just like gender, right? Nothing is as binary as I think sometimes we think it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. And I'll say that we are currently funded by the Ministry of Attorney General to support women. And right. So it is through our community, through our educational colleges, and I'll even say like elementary schools as well. We had a GSA raise $800 for us, a Gay Straight Alliance. Like, it was super awesome. But through concerts, through weddings, it is the people in our local community that see a need to support everyone in the community, not just one population, even though a certain demographic, it applies to them more, but it doesn't only apply to them. And I think when we start to limit our services, now KSAC, we support all genders. There are certain programs that are for women or for non-binary folk or LGBTQ folk, but that's not to exclude. We still support all genders at our center, and it's so vitally important. Someone on Facebook says, yes, never settle, especially with work. Get what you need to support what you want. Shouldn't have to limit how you want to live your life only by accepting what is giving and not asking more.
You're a cheetah. You are a gosh darn cheetah. You know, you deserve to run wild and get whatever the heck you want. No matter who tells you you can't. We're telling you you can, so send them to us.
Okay.
I'm getting fired up now.
I love it.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot more from that book that you wanted to highlight and talk about, so let's keep going through it.
Yeah, I'm going to read another quote. The first one was the longest, I promise. But I think, you know, if we're talking about people, and particularly women, not being able to ask for more, let's talk about what more is for a minute. And so, like I said, Glennon runs this fundraiser where she supports so many women and talks to women all day long, every day, about what they're going through. And this is something she says. Our deep desires, women, but all people, again, are wise, true, beautiful, and things we can grant ourselves without abandoning our knowing. Following our deep desire always returns us to integrity. I have spent the last decade of my life listening to women talk about what they most desire. This is what women tell me they want. I want a minute to take a deep breath. I want rest, peace, passion. I want good food and true, wild, intimate sex. I want relationships with no lies. I want to be comfortable in my own skin. I want to be seen and to be loved. I want joy and safety for my children and for everyone else's children. I want justice for all. I want help, community, and connection. I want to be forgiven, and I want to finally forgive. I want enough money and power to stop feeling afraid. Not to make other people feel afraid, I'll just add.
Yeah.
I want to find my purpose down here and live it out fully. I want to look at the news and see less pain and more love. I want to look at the people in my life and really see them and love them. I want to look in the mirror and really see myself and love myself. I want to feel alive. And Glennon says, the blueprints of heaven are etched in the deep desires of women. And that line just blows me away. What women want is good, what women want is beautiful, and what women want is dangerous, but not to women and not to the common good. What women want is a threat to the injustice of the status quo. What women want is for imbalanced relationships to be equalized, children to be fed, corrupt governments to topple, wars to end, and civilization to transform. And then she says, maybe Eve was never meant to be our warning. Maybe she was meant to be our model. Own your wanting, eat the apple, and let it burn. Just this, like, I want to cry. Like, it's just so profound.
And you know, the things that you talked about what was written in the book about women wanting, like, none of those were like, oh, we want yachts and houses and expensive shoes. It just kind of comes down to rights and loving ourselves.
Totally.
And being in fear of loving ourselves or wanting to have other people love us and not think about it as a threat.
Which is so hard. And this is why I think part of why I think MENding is so wonderful is because for a long time, men's deep desires have been power. And then that's not to say that men are inherently bad, because I can already tell that that will be the interpretation of some folks when I say men for a long time have wanted power. And I hear that. I get why you would feel that way. But what I'm saying is that we have had our rights for so long and we're so used to being on top that now we've built these systems to keep ourselves there at the detriment of other people. And so it's just so interesting how we men have forever, I guess, I would say, you know, took most of the power. And MENding is just this beautiful program to, yes, learn about how this stuff hurts us as well. I mean, if we talk about the COVID pandemic, how men are significantly less likely to wear a mask. What is that? And so we learn about that, but then we also learn that we're in this position of power. And like we were talking about earlier, we can simultaneously help other men and use this ridiculous amount of power that we've quite literally murdered and stolen to help people who don't have it. And we can do both of those things at the same time. And that's what's so beautiful about this program.
I don't know if you have this quote ready, but it was the liberation one that you spoke about last night. I don't know if you have that quote or if you'd like to talk about it, but I thought that it was really beautiful and really spoke not only like to women in particular with what's being written in here, but really like especially men. to step out of that box, if you will. This is how I'm supposed to act and supposed to be, and how I'm supposed to be a bro, and, you know, bro before, right? And living by these really harmful mentalities. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, you know what? I don't have the quote ready, but I have it in my mind. Don't even worry. So I'll provide some context. The context of the quote is that Glennon Doyle was married to this man named Craig, and she had a couple of kids with him. And then he cheated on her. And sort of the precipitation of this book is she spent a lot of time saying, well, you know, I'm in a good enough marriage. A good mother wouldn't leave her kids or make her kids leave her father, or wouldn't break up a family. A good mother wouldn't do that. And after talking to another writer, she spoke about how she thought, I'm staying in this marriage for my daughter, but would I want this marriage for my daughter? And that is so huge, right? I cried when I read that the first time. I'm a man and I cried, I'm telling you, because it's just so, it's so huge. When other people see us living our best life, I'll say, it gives them permission too. And so the quote is, there's no such thing as one-way liberation. When we set ourselves free and when we're true to ourselves, we automatically give everyone around us permission to do the same. And that is so huge. And Glennon went on to write that she left her husband to marry Abby Wambach, and she married a woman. And then, you know, 7 years later, I don't know what it is, her son came out as gay. And her ex-husband called her and said, I'm just so glad that you left me and followed your heart, because if you didn't, I don't know that our son would have ever came out. It's so powerful.
That really, like, I don't even know what to say now.
Right?
After reading that, right? I do a lot of work in the sexuality field, and just thinking about how suppressed we are in our pleasure, and how our pleasure is always for other people, but sometimes we forget about our own pleasure and being able to vocalize that. And to see people in this more liberated state, in a way, kind of liberates you, right? Like if you're around people who are happy, you're gonna be wanting to be a happy person too. It's not saying that we should suppress emotion and stuff, but you know, we feel, as human beings, we are really drawn to connection, right? We're drawn to connecting to other people. And when we see other people living their true life, we're going to want to do that too. And that's so profound. Would you want that kind of life for your child?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing is, we know that a lot of people don't want to be in their boxes. I would argue that most people, whether consciously or subconsciously, it might be either don't want to be in their boxes. And so at some point, it's going to take everyone getting out of their box for us to get rid of the box, right? And, you know, as each person does it, hopefully it spurs on one more and gives them permission to do the same. That's the big thing, is we just have to do it, y'all, and we can.
Lucas on our Facebook was saying, I think it was, freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all, or something along those lines.
Wow, that's good too.
Yeah, I think he was trying to quote the quote that, but I think he just made his own quote.
I think he did, and I think I love it just as much.
Definitely. Yeah. That's really profound, right? Like, is this the type of life that we would want our children, or even our friends or colleagues, to live, right?
Well, Carl Jung says something along the lines of, like, the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of their parent. And that, it's like, this is the funny thing, is that these are not new ideas. These are it's just that relearning, right?
I think about it all the time, like I come from a psychology and science background, but it's like every single study is just like, we're not being ourselves, and we want to be ourselves, and having to repress that is what's making us sad, and experiencing emotional turmoil, spiritual turmoil. Like, it's like adding to all these things. But okay, so this is all nice, but what do you think is stopping us from stepping outside of that box?
You know what? I think it's tricky, because the answer is, probably impossible to figure out totally. But from my perspective, it's systems and it's people. It's that classic macro micro level stuff. Because I'm going to use an example maybe, and this is again from Glennon Doyle, Untamed. I'm obsessed. If you are thinking about a book to read, anyone, read this book. It's so great. If you want to. She says, thinking about women, right? We talk about how a good woman in the eyes of maybe our society is a woman who takes care of her children, takes care of her community, takes care of her partner, her husband, if she's being a real good woman. And the ultimate compliment for a lot of people to give a woman is, you are so selfless. We talked a little bit about this last night too, it's these little things, right? Coded language that we use every day. How is it that the ultimate compliment for a lot of people that we can give a woman is that she has lost herself and she's nothing but other people? How is that language we use? And it's just okay.
And I totally agree that it's a mixture of both people and larger structures at play. I don't know if you see what's going around in the news right now about a Brantford lesbian couple who reached out to a videographer company to film their wedding. And it's funny because I actually have the original post, but they reached out to film their wedding and they straight up said, we don't film homosexual couples. And I'll say quickly about that is that the original post has a lot of incredible comments, a lot of people offering their service for free. It's amazing. But okay, so structurally speaking, we have the ability to get married to whatever consensual human being we want to be married to. But on the one-to-one social level, we haven't accepted that. And by we, I mean, I like to think that generally speaking, most people are okay with it. And unfortunately, we have those people who offer services who don't want to be inclusive or don't want to be respectful is what it all comes down to. But it's definitely an interplay of both. So structurally, we have that liberation, but on the social level, we don't. Holding hands in public is still something that couples in homosexual relationships fear.
Right.
And, you may be even in a straight relationship, but if you don't present yourself as male and female, you still experience that, right? And so I think it's definitely a mixture of all levels here that we're feeling that pressure. And it's I'm excited to finally break away from that, because I feel as if men especially are really pressured to fit into the man box that we talked about, to be that strong, that tough, that heterosexual, the sexual leader, athletic person, to fit into that. And it's hard to step out of that without social rejection, economic rejection. Yeah.
Can we talk about shame for a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
We only have an hour, but so.
Sure. Where are we at? I can't see.
15 minutes.
Cool. So Dr. Brene Brown, I think a lot of folks know who she is. If you've seen the video on YouTube, the TED Talk, the animated abridgment of her TED Talk about empathy with the fox and the bear, I think.
We do have it on our YouTube page. If you go under playlist, it is under there. Yeah.
Great. That's the cutest video. And just so she researches shame and vulnerability. And so, this is maybe a complex topic, and probably I don't have the answers to it, so we don't have to dive too deep into it. But we talk a lot about how shame forces people to stay in their box. And so something that I'm seeing a lot of right now in social justice movements that I find, I'm not saying it's wrong, I don't have enough expertise, but I find it troubling. I find it tricky for me to reconcile, is how much we're using shame as a social justice tool. And so, speaking of this post you're talking about with the videographers who were unwilling to film, right? It was filming this homosexual wedding. The response has been, I think, twofold. It's been support this couple, which is beautiful, and also, burn these people to the ground and send them to heck in a handbasket today.
Mm-hmm.
And what we know is, well, I don't know, but what Brene Brown's like incredible large volume, like incredible research suggests is that shame does not produce change. Shame puts people and keeps them in their boxes. Shame is a very self-focused emotion, and it's about us. Shame is we're a bad person, and guilt is we did a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to examine our own behavior and change it, we have to have sort of a pillar of self-esteem or self-worth to do that, because it's not easy to check yourself. And so when we shame people who have done harmful things, it's less likely, according to Brené's research, that they will change. And so, you know, if we loop back to sexual violence, I've seen a lot of posts right now that post the names of perpetrators of sexual violence and say, everyone, you know, beat these people up if you see them, or don't hire them. And far be it from me to say that a survivor shouldn't be doing that. Not my message at all. I love to see survivors doing whatever they need to do to feel better and to feel okay. Not saying stop those things. Not trying to limit survivors' healing. My only concern is that if we don't find a way to also do something else, I don't know what it is, that we're actually just going to make the behavior more overt, and it's still going to be happening. And it's just going to be harder to catch. It's going to be more nefarious.
Yeah. More overt and more covert.
At the same time.
Yeah. Someone commented saying, I heard of the wedding videographer, and then they saw a TikTok of a local Brantford queer person that said they're going to go a step up and actually educate. And that TikTok star brought them a children's book about empathy, I believe, to their studio. We wonder if there's a part 2. But no, that's totally, like, it's totally understandable. If you keep shaming someone and saying, you're a bad person, you're a bad person, you're a bad person, you need to change, you're a bad person. And then let's even top that with death threats that we see on social media too. Do you think someone's going to go, oh my gosh, I am a bad person, I should change? Or do you think they're going to push back? They're going to put in that defensive strategy. They're going to deflect, defend. They're not going to want it. They're not going to be willing to even learn and engage. And the original post had nothing to say about that company.
Yeah.
What they simply were doing is saying, hey, look, this happens. Who else can we call? And they just happened to leave the service provider's name in there. But do with it what you will. But yeah, like it's almost as if we're scared, right? Because we don't want to mess up ourselves. And so the best way to do that is to point the finger at other people. Oh, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. But to go all the way back to what you're saying at the beginning of this conversation, it's all about checking our biases. I'm gonna cough.
Bystander intervention. Bystander intervention in a productive way. And so, the message isn't to not call out homophobic, sexist behavior, because good golly, do we ever need to do more of that? But then what's the step after that? And by the way, I just want to put a caveat that I think that part of why we've come to these sort of extremes, and I'll be honest, I do it too, right? Like when I see something that's homophobic, maybe for a business, I'm like, oh wow, I've never used this business, but I'm going to rate them 1 star and leave a scathing review and share it, and maybe I'll call them and cuss them out, right? That's my first reaction. And it's because if it's homophobia, I am in a less privileged position. So it's these situations where we feel powerless and we have to do something, and no one's making room for us to do anything productive. And so it's like, well, this is what it is then. We got to do what we have to do. So there's no shame on the people, on the folks who are doing these shaming behaviors, because I get it. I've done it too. It's because and I still do it, to be honest. It's because we don't know what else to do. And maybe right now in our society, there is nothing else to do. So good for you for being a frickin' cheetah and fighting back. But let's just cool it a little on the death threats and try to figure out what we can do to actually make change. Let's do both. Again, it always goes back to this both.
And I think about too our criminal justice system. It's all about punitive, right? And so we are taught what to do with the bad guy. Put him in jail, and they're gonna learn their lesson. But that's not the way it works. Does it work with the toddler when you tell them to go sit in a corner?
Right.
Or does it work when you then turn them around after sitting in the corner and have a conversation with them about what they've done and how they can do better?
And the corner doesn't need to be a stone bedroom where they're violated every day, right? Just to call that out about our prison system as well. I spoke, do we still have a few minutes?
We have 10 minutes according to Instagram. Sorry,
right.
Facebook fam.
There's this, so I work in higher education, like I mentioned, and part of my role is managing and resolving non-academic student misconduct. So not like cheating and plagiarism, that falls under different folks' portfolios, but when students do something that break our code of conduct in residence, they come to meet with me. And there's a lot of debate about this exact topic within student conduct professionals of what's our approach? Is our approach punitive? Do we hand people fines and give them warnings and evict them? Or is there restorative justice we can do? Is there developmental work we can do? And I think that this is a conversation that's happening in so many different industries. And it's so important because like you said, we know that punitive measures often don't work. Beyond maybe they'll stop a behavior for the interim, but it'll come out again, maybe in a different way, maybe probably in a worse way. And so it's really important, right? We have to, I believe, move away from punitive responses. I try very hard to not be punitive in my work unless I've tried everything else and the student just doesn't want to do anything else, then it's like, well, we got to do something. But I find that most people respond so much better when you meet them where they're at and treat them like a human who made a mistake rather than an awful person who needs to be punished.
But who punishes, so who privileges from punitive measures? It's the people that can afford bail. It's the people who have places that they can live and move to if they get kicked out of residence, right? We see this time and time again, that the guy from that 70s show is miraculously able to post a $1 million bail.
As if that's any human's reality.
Where does that go? Back into it's an entire circulating system. But William, I genuinely appreciate you tuning in here all the way from Alberta, speaking about the program, being one of the OGs of the MENding program. But if there are any men out there watching, I know we've had quite a few commenting. We actually had someone from Sweden on our Instagram commenting, wanting to learn more about this topic. What is your last statement to any men that are out there listening? Maybe they've become curious by this topic. What's your message to them?
It's going to be a Glennon quote, classic. Glennon Doyle quote. I'm just going to plug it one more time. Untamed by Glennon Doyle. If you want to, buy this freaking book. So what I would say is that it's overwhelming. The most overwhelming part of doing this work is before you start doing it. It's like, don't get me wrong, it's overwhelming while you're doing it too, and it's freaking hopeless some days. But the quote from Glennon is, just keep doing the next right thing. And so that's my message to particularly men, right? Particularly folks who have the privilege, but all people too, right? Just keep doing the next right thing. That's all we can do. That is all we can do.
I love it. William, thank you so much for coming on and chatting today. We've had so many great comments and so many people tuning in. Just want to thank you so much for all the work you do, both inside and outside of the province. But let me know when you're coming back to Ontario.
For sure. Thank you so much, Alicia, for all the work you do and KSAC does. You folks are incredible.
It's a continuous learning opportunity. I was even talking to our MENding coordinator today, and we even realized something, more structural issues that we need to think about and how we're okay with that. And it was in the school system as well. So maybe that's another one. You can come on again and we'll talk about that. But thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and thank you to everyone tuning in.
Bye, everyone.